the devices run out. So we just go. I've got 4 things.
Yeah, it's actually true. When you know that hierarchy of needs with Wi-Fi scribbled at the bottom, there's another one with batteries scribbled beneath that, which is actually my favorite because normally my battery goes before my internet.
Okay, I think let's begin. And thank you for attending this particular session, which I'm chairing. It's Wi-Fi deployment strategies in public spaces. Just to introduce the panel, I'll start off with the gentleman on my right, Brian Dooley, the CEO of a company called Y Taxi. Hands up if you've heard of Y Taxi. Okay, wonderful, good. You need to educate people. Zaire Khan is from Project Isizwe, which is rolling out Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi in China. So you're going to tell us a little bit about that. Who's heard of Project Isizwe? I'm sure 100%. Okay. Eli Hagopian, 2 roles. One, CEO of a company called Nomosphere, which advises service providers on rolling out business models for Wi-Fi and executing them. And as the chairperson of WAPA, so we have a double hat on, so she'll be able to tell us things from both sides of the spectrum as a budding entrepreneur in this space, and also what WAPA thinks of it. So we'll see what she can say. We were supposed to have a lady called Zanele Monokhotla, who is the CEO of a founder of a company called Free Wi. I presume that's free Wi-Fi. But unfortunately, because of the fact we moved the meeting 1 hour later, she couldn't be here. But in her place, we have got an equally lovely gentleman, Melvin Chagonda, from a company called Moban Africa. And I've heard of them. They actually, I think, do some work for the taxi, white taxi guys. And so he has kindly volunteered to step in. The topic, again, public spaces. The presentation after this will deal with real estate. So we're going to exclude it from this topic. So we're not going to include malls, and we're not going to include stadiums and airports in these discussions. We are going to look at things like schools, communities, community centers, taxi ranks, and other mass gathering places, a little bit outside the traditional paid type model, which is probably going to be discussed in the next session. But just as what we want to discuss, and I brought it up early on, this idea of who pays. So it'll be interesting to see how Moban thinks of who pays, because I think they're a service provider and they get money from people, so someone has to pay. Brian, so you just have to say who pays, and you'll tell us about that. And Zaire as well, from your side, who pays. I raised it up with the minister about this fair and equitable thing, because if government is going to subsidize certain projects and not others, is that possibly unfair? And let's explore it, and let's see the view also from the audience, because on what basis do they select certain projects to sponsor and others must be led to run commercially, unsponsored, etc., including possibly Zaire's initiative. So let's debate that. Also brought up the issue which Elliot raised earlier about service levels. Do we expect people to get the same or similar service level? As an example, today when you select between MTN and Vodacom, I think 10 years ago you probably did, but today do you say, hang on, who's giving me a better service? Who's got more coverage? Who's more reliable? I'm not sure that discussion takes place today. Yeah, 10 years ago when they didn't have everything sorted out, maybe with Cell C you have those discussions when you're about to say like, oh God, yeah, sorry, everyone's from Cell C. But the point is, certainly between the two big players, it's one of the same. You probably go on brand, which one you're more familiar with, what your relatives use, etc. So the question about this is currently, is the user experience going to be the same? So if someone in the city of Johannesburg and someone in Tshwane, we talked about caps, is it fair to have a different types of things? The other issue, just quickly, is in this model where advertising pays, or you are the product, the issue of privacy, POPI, etc. So let me kick off, because also an opportunity for the panelists to talk about some of the projects they're doing. Maybe I'll throw it to Ellie first, to maybe just talk about what business models you're seeing deployed, and internationally, locally, and kind of what are you seeing working?
Sure, thank you, Raj. So there's, in terms of Wi-Fi business models, just to maybe give a little bit of context, there's really three general types of ways that Wi-Fi can be monetized. So the first is, that you guys are all familiar with, is to have the user pay. This is your classic go to a restaurant, go to a hotspot, go to a public area. Can you guys hear me okay? No? Okay. Okay. I'll try and speak louder. Is this better? Okay. Okay, thank you. So there's really three different ways you can monetize a Wi-Fi network. The first is to have the user pay directly by entering credit card information, buying a data bundle, very similar to what you might do on a mobile network. Another form of user pay, so that can either be retail or there can also be wholesale models. If you're a Wi-Fi network operator, you can wholesale it to people who will be engaging in retail type of monetization. The other two ways, one is to have the advertiser pay. So again, most of us here is probably familiar with either maybe watching a video to get online, filling out a survey to get online, having ads that come up, maybe they pop up over a web page or something like this. There's lots of different models, but generally speaking, you can have an advertiser pay for access to that user, and that can either be very general, untargeted, in advertising terms, run of network ads, or they can start to get very, very localized and specific when you start to engage with individual consumers in known locations, in retail locations, for example, in shopping centers. Some of the things that we heard about from Brian this morning, for those of you guys that heard the plenary. And then the final way is to have the venue pay. So a venue can be either a restaurant, it could be a shopping center, it could be a hotel. A municipality in this kind of categorization, in my mind, is actually a form of a venue. So you could have a government that's actually saying, we want to provide a service to our citizens, we are then going to fund it. So that's kind of broadly speaking the three different types of models that you see. And some Wi-Fi networks are actually monetized by not just one, but actually a mix of different sorts of models. So I think that's some of the sorts of innovations that we're beginning to see. To answer your question about what I've seen here, I've seen all of those things here. Actually, I think the kind of hyper local. Relevant advertising is some of the areas that my company is working on, and that's really very new in this market. It's new in a lot of markets as well, to be able to engage in very, very local position-based advertising based on Wi-Fi. That's been around for a while, but a lot of solutions wind up being again very general. Everyone who walks into a retailer might get the same message. It's not particularly personalized. But I think yes. So overseas as well, you see these models also, and I think it's the market has evolved from a couple of years ago. The majority was the user pays, and we're now moving away from that. And if I had to guess, I would say probably in this market at the moment, even if you look at MWeb, for example, you look at Telkom, you look at Always On, those guys all have a form of free offer. It's either free just for their subscribers, or it's free for everyone for 30 minutes, or up to a data cap or something like this. And then above and beyond that, there can be an advertising play, or it could just be absorbed by the network operator as part of a convergence strategy.
Thank you, Ellie. Thanks for that comment. Zaire, so in the Project Disease way, who pays? Who's funding it? Who's the operator? Who gets money out of this? And what in return do the users and the, taxpayers of that community get?
Okay, so let me start. I was actually a bit surprised that when Raj asked how many people have heard of Project Disease, there were only about 5 or 6 hands that went up, which is, I hope, not a true reflection of how many of you have actually heard of Project Disease. So Project Disease has got a specific vision and objective. We're essentially a group of ex-telecoms people. We've been in the industry for a multitude of years, and the objective was that where there's a market failure, in this instance, the market failure is bridging the digital divide or connecting the unconnected. That's where Project Disease has stepped in, try and fulfill that obligation, that mandate that all of us as telecoms people should have as part of our mandate to deliver to this country. In order to achieve this, we've embarked, initially we thought we'd just get corporate sponsors. We'll find a corporate out there that's got a CSI obligation and wants to give something back to communities, and that's how these projects will be funded. And it very quickly turned out, this was back in 2013, that there's a whole different avenue to take. What is the basic essence of having people connected to the internet? The objective is to make sure people have access to information, people can empower themselves, there's opportunities for education and learning, there's opportunities for economic development, for health services, and that's what essentially 60% of this country doesn't have access to. And in order to migrate away from the traditional telecommunications models where we expected that consumers will pay for services, the reality is that majority of this country is below the, well, just on par with the poverty line. And it's a bread and butter decision of whether I buy airtime or whether I actually just go and feed my family. And when it boils down to a simple question like that, people are always going to revert just sustaining themselves. Project Isizwe then found an incredible partner in the city of Tshwane, who had as part of its vision the obligation to enable services where there is a market failure. And their vision was also that there's been a failure from the telecoms industry in order to enable affordable services to people. That's where their vision and strategy was to enable free Wi-Fi services or internet services for its people. And they found a perfect partner in Project Isizwe, and our visions aligned. And to date, we've actually gone from having absolutely no municipality with active live deployments to city of Tshwane being essentially the biggest deployment, definitely in South Africa. And based on my personal opinion, and there's no formal research done on this, but essentially throughout Africa, city of Tshwane has the biggest open public space deployments. There are currently 480 live environments where citizens in Tshwane can go and log on to the internet. And by June this year, there'll be just over 600. What we've seen in terms of people actually leveraging this free internet access, that first and foremost, education works. Second, economic development. There's people that have been middle of the night. You wonder what they're doing at sites. They're actually browsing job websites. And the third thing is obviously just having the ability to use social media. And these are the type of services that are offered by all of us on a day-to-day basis that normally majority of this country doesn't have access to. In terms of the funding model, to answer Raj's question, we see it as government providing a basic service, just like sanitation, water supply. That's all government is doing. They're providing another basic service. Our generations, it's pretty much past its prime. It's about the youth that are coming up. They can't live in the future without access to the internet. That's why it's essential for government to get involved. Thanks, Raj. Anything else?
Desire? Yes, just to follow up with that. Do you cap, first of all, data size, then do you cap on applications that they can enter into, etc. Because is it more about education, access to jobs, which is your kind of the in, or do you kind of open it to anything that you do it when you're in a hotel or other public places?
Yes, let me tell you about the service definition of the Project Isizwe standardized services. We offer 250 megabytes per device per day, which is equivalent to 7.5 gigs a month. There are currently excess of 500,000 people that have used Project Isizwe networks. On a daily basis, we have over 40,000 unique users connecting to the network. Once they use, and the 250 megs is pure internet access, and they can go onto YouTube, they can go and do anything they want to. There is open DNS users for adult content filtering, which means that people can't go and watch porn videos or anything like that. Although there's huge demand on a daily basis, we get lots of email requests, like, please unblock this board. But we do always acknowledge it's an open public network. There are kids that are connecting to this network and using services for educational purposes, and we can't unblock any of that type of stuff. The service definition goes further to once the cap is reached, people still have unlimited access to our Tobetsa portal. Within the Tobetsa portal, we focus on 3 key areas: that's education, economic development, and social inclusion. So things like Wikipedia. There was a video, probably about 2 years ago now, where school kids in the country were asking the mobile operators, please unblock Wikipedia for them, and make it available unlimited. That's not available yet unless I think MTN has done some work to that in that regard, but you have to use the Opera browser in order to get to it. On our side, it's completely unlimited to anyone to access, and we've seen lots of people actually leveraging and benefiting out of this. And this is only students and scholars, which essentially we've achieved our objective in that regard. Then we've got government e-services, which is where government doesn't mind funding this. With 40,000 people having access to government e-services in the city of Tshwane, it adds significant value with enhancing government's ability to communicate with people. Then we've got a whole host of other type of new content, and this is curated content that constantly comes up. We've got health services, we've got Siyavula, Funza, all of these new type of content that's available, and it's all related to education, has come up through to us. I've had Pete from the US Embassy that's now sent me some information on allowing the US Embassy website to be unlimited, available unlimited, which is an option if people are really keen and interested in what's happening in the States and want information, or how can they unlock opportunities from the States. Then we've got, that's the service definition, the average line speed over our network, and this is because it's essentially using municipal infrastructure. So we've built out where the city does not have infrastructure, and where the city does have fiber infrastructure, and they've had it for the last 10 years, by the way. We are able to give the average speed over this network of 7 megabit per second symmetrical services. We did a similar type of project in the Western Cape where we enabled services to Atlantis and Robertson, and the average speed over that network is symmetrical 5 megabit per second speeds. So we haven't brought these people that have never been connected before into the world of the internet with lower than average speed experience. We've brought them on par with what all of us pay for on a daily basis. And the objective is because content on the web is becoming essentially a lot more reliant on high speed. That's why we can deliver things like this. And then just to throw something in there that you guys, if you haven't really heard what it sees, where you wouldn't really know about Wi-Fi TV. But Wi-Fi TV is something we've just launched over the network, which enables hyper-localized content. And there's 5 channels at the moment. It's a channel for Atteridgeville, Soshanguve, Mamelodi, CBD in Pretoria, as well as a My City channel. The My City channel has the most views because it's a question and answer session where the community members can ask the mayor any question and the mayor actually responds on video. And it's available for unlimited access over the Tshwane Free Wi-Fi network.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's an initiative which I think you've been publicizing quite a bit, but perhaps you need to do a little bit more marketing on this. Thank you. Thank you, Zaire.
Thanks, Raj.
So, Brian, Zaire said that Project Isizwe was a result of market failure, indictment of the telecommunications companies industry. Your initiative, White Taxi, I've known a little bit about it, again, driven kind of by the taxi industry. Demand almost created, or supply created because of demand from your users, which is the taxi industry. Tell us how it came about and what are the driving forces behind that and what you intend to do with your initiative.
Raj, thank you very much. I think everyone that thinks about taxis, you think about that guy that cut you off this morning. If you follow him,
Did you hear what he said?
Yeah, don't do that.
After the guy cuts you off, you just follow him, you get free Wi-Fi.
Something else.
White Taxi is an initiative of SANTACO, the South African National Taxi Council. It's part of their 2020 strategy in terms of improving their image with their 15 million commuters that use the taxis on a daily basis. The taxi industry goes right back to the 1950s, and they're the biggest single mode of transport in the country. They transport 30% of the country's population every single day with an average commute time of 45 minutes. So White Taxi really came about as an initiative of the taxi industry. They don't only drive Zala buses, but they're really proper business people. The industry itself is worth 90 billion rands with a B. 90 billion rands per year in taxi fares. 15 million people inside of taxis every single day. And they wanted to give an additional service to their commuters on a daily basis. And I've been here since the morning, and we've listened to a whole lot of acronyms today, and a lot of 3-letter acronyms and beautiful technology jargon today. But nobody has actually spoken about the people that we're servicing, the people that are actually going to connect to the service that we're giving them. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to bring a human truth to what we're doing today. We launched this project 24 months ago, but our official launch was only on the 12th of June in 2014. And on that day, I told a 3-minute story, if you allow me to do that. 3 minutes, I promise.
Is it good?
It's a very good story. And I could sit here and tell you around all the wonderful technology that we use inside of the taxis and the speeds that we have, your 7 up and 7 down. By the way, we get 2 up and 2 down constantly in motion. And I wanted to tell you about a young man called Thabo. And Thabo represents a couple of million people who's 21 years old, finished matric. And Thabo has a diploma that he picked up from some school downtown in Johannesburg, and he's a call center agent. Thabo is a child of a single mother who lives on 30 rand every single day. His job, he wakes up, he cleans the house, he buys bread, and goes to the internet cafe every day. Without fail, Thabo puts in a CV to somewhere every single day. And it costs him 12 rand every day. That's what the local internet cafe does. Thabo, on this one particular day, gets a phone call to say, we received your CV, we want you to come for an interview. Thabo has bought bread for 11 rand, right? He now has 21 rand left. Thabo could quickly go to the internet cafe and go and send his CV, but he won't get to the interview because he doesn't have enough money. With the white taxi, he can get into the taxi, he's paid 7 rand, go to town, email his CV while he's in transit, Google the company that he's going to do an interview in, have the interview and have enough money to come back. And that is the power of in-transit Wi-Fi. And that's the story that you want to position from a white taxi point of view. If you look at our Facebook, there's a lady who sits and is actually crying and says for the first time she can use Wi-Fi for free or internet for free. And that is a human truth of what we're trying to do from a white taxi point of view. We have 1,800 Wi-Fi enabled taxis around the country. And so next time the guy cuts you off, wave at him, follow him. He's got a high-speed network. Right, that's me from my side.
Thank you. Have you made a video of this tab? Oh, okay. Okay. Let me get to Melvin because I want Melvin to explain how his business model works, and then we'll talk one or two things and then open it up to the audience, to the floor. So Melvin, Moban Africa. I've heard of Moban International. Just tell us about Moban Africa in terms of how the commercial model works with partners such as White Taxi.
Okay, thanks, Raj. Basically, Moban Africa runs Africa and Middle East. Unlike other guys, you'll never hear of Moban because typically like a device, you'll hear of Samsung, iPhone, and so forth. Moban is the back end. So we are the advertising enabling platform that enables White Taxi, Free Wi, and everyone else to offer free Wi-Fi. Our model, simplified, is similar to TV. We all know DSTV in South Africa, so you've got the paid option. iPhone and so forth is for one type of person, very expensive device. So bringing it down to TV, DSTV is a paid for model. If you watch a movie, there are no adverts because the adverts pay for the content. So your subscription pays a good component of the revenue of DSTV. The additional revenue from advertising is during sport and so forth where there are breaks. Then there's the free-to-air model, which is your SABC ETV. The same movie you watch on DSTV is going to be double the time because there's adverts, and adverts pay for the content. Similarly, in our model with White Taxi, Free Wi, Nano Solutions, big telcos, they'll offer free Wi-Fi because there'll be adverts that are flighted which monetize the Wi-Fi. Now these adverts are full-page adverts, not banner ads, full-page adverts giving you a skip option. And the way we operate is, unlike other models, we've got a start page. The start page basically says to you, accept the terms and conditions of use. The terms and conditions of use are, you're going to get free Wi-Fi. But in intent to you getting the free Wi-Fi, you're giving permission to flighting of ads. And then you start using the data. So you start having the benefit before the ads come up. You can literally check your email or whatever and sometimes not even see the ad because that's how the model operates. So the more data you use, the more of these ads will flight, and each ad will come with a skip button. If you want to engage with the ad, you can engage, but what the advertiser is paying for is the flighting of the ad. is the opportunity to expose their brand or their campaign to you. You press skip, and you can use as much as you want. We don't recommend that you keep your data, because the more data that people use, the more ads we fly, the more money we make. And we've shown, without the current benefits that are being spoken about, that we can generate more money from advertising than if you do the traditional model, which is currently popular. And when we started in Africa about 4 years ago, in South Africa particularly, and I was pleased to hear Andile's numbers, because suddenly I'm not insane anymore. 4 years ago, we predicted that there will be 2 million hotspots in South Africa. So 5 million is not overshooting, it's not unreasonable. And we truly believe it can be that. So at 2 million hotspots in South Africa, we thought we would sort of be cutting it fine, but it's possible. And there are certain challenges that are already limiting that potential. If you look at a classic property like this, you'll have 40 different operators having different APs here. That facilities sharing and those type of things start falling into play. We can use our resources much better, as opposed to all bolting onto the same place, trying to eat into the same market. The hardware is the hardware. Let's look at how we can expand on that rollout by sharing those facilities and doing those type of things. In terms of the advertising revenue that we are seeing in the market, the first component of the advertisers that we're getting is marketing spend. So all your major brands are currently spending with us. Then the next component is your enterprise development funding. We've seen certain corporates spending part of their money with us. And a big component that's not even on the radar, because when you talk marketing, having a marketing discussion, is your CSI funding, where we've seen corporates come and sponsor Wi-Fi in the areas that they operate. And what we'll typically give them is rights, 2-year or 3-year rights, to say this Wi-Fi is brought to you by this big packaging company or this big mine. Guys who are not into marketing. So we've seen those 3 forms of funding come to fund the way we operate.
Thank you, Melvin. Thank you. One question to you, then we're going to open up to the floor. Are you suggesting that paid Wi-Fi is dead?
Absolutely not. As I think the panel and some of the speakers said this morning, you almost need a hybrid model. Hybrid in the sense that a lower LSM, because of the affordability issue, no-brainer, absolute no-brainer. And if you think about it, any rural area, wherever you go in South Africa, there is radio campaigns, there's billboards, there's TV advertising, because the marketer wants to talk to them. Now, what more to give them free Wi-Fi and offer them this advertising opportunity to engage and to talk directly to the communities that they want to engage with.
Thank you, Melvin. So I think I've got a few questions, but let me give the audience opportunity to ask, either make a comment, criticize, agree with what the panelists have said, or ask specifically a question or a generic question. So can we get some volunteers? Juanita.
Thank you, Raj. My question is for Project Isizwe. I wanted to know how you monetize this network. Is it also based on advertising revenues? Is it a non-profit, .org type initiative? How does it work?
Project Isizwe is a non-profit organization. The network we've deployed has no commercial services offered. There is no advertising, there are no catches. It's funded by government for people. So we haven't commercialized at all. We do recognize this. The volumes that we actually carry in terms of traffic over this network is significant opportunity to commercialize. But from government perspective, they are only looking at it as market failure is what they're addressing. They're connecting the unconnected, they're bridging the digital divide. They're not interested at this stage to commercialize any services. So although we know there's tons of models now, pleased to hear that some of them do work, we have not, within the city of Tshwane, deployed any commercial services. We have done pilot testing on various different scenarios, and this is largely on Western Cape deployments. We have done hyper-localized advertising. One thing we found is you've got to have volume. Without the volume, and WeTaxi is essentially, you've got the perfect space. If they carry that much traffic, in terms of commuters onto those taxis, they have enough scale to actually make money out of or commercialize it through marketing initiatives. On the Seasway side, Western Cape deployment, there's very few traffic, very low traffic footprint. And that's because we've covered Atlantis, which is essentially not a high density populated area. Robertson, also not a high density populated area. There's not enough traffic for anyone to want to target those people. None of the big brands are interested in hyper-localized advertising to those two areas only. Everybody wants to target the metro, which is the city of Tshwane. Everybody wants to get in there and advertise to 2.5 official registered voters, but essentially it's more like 3.5 million people in the city of Tshwane. And that's why from the Seasway side, we've done 3G offload testing with mobile operators. It works. We've proven that it does work, but we haven't commercialized any of those services yet. Of course, we'd love to at some point, but it's entirely up to our sponsors, which in this case is government. If they want to go ahead and commercialize, to create sustainability for the future of these networks, then by all means we will.
Thank you. We do have only 10 minutes, unfortunately, as you know, we've cut it, so please keep the responses very concise as well. At the back, loud please.
It's good to be here. Your model is obviously quite groundbreaking. I think there are quite a few other companies wanting to, municipalities, looking at opportunities. So you might end up in the short term having, say, 5 or 10 or more service providers. What are your thoughts on having some sort of basic standards or a way of evaluating whether municipalities in future are getting value for money from their deployments?
Well, the reality is, unfortunately, what I've seen in government now, I've been working nationally with governments, none of them work together. So, for example, the city of Joburg would want to do its own research papers and not take the model of the city of Tshwane. City of Cape Town works exactly the same way. They'd rather have their own insights and appoint a third-party consulting company to give them advice as opposed to leveraging off the proven solutions that are already there. And until government starts working together from that front, you'll always have that disparity of multiple people looking at different solutions. If anyone in government wants a standard or benchmark that they want to work towards, or provide a third-party provider with specific parameters on which to base the service on, then by all means, Project Seasway is all about open information sharing. We can give you the design specifications, we can give you the type of service, the type of capacity that each user must be provisioned for each user, subject to the number of people you want to connect to your network. By all means, we'll share that information openly with anyone that's interested.
Thank you. No more questions for Zaire. We have to balance the rest of the panel as well. Or you can also make a comment and what you've heard, discuss that. You had, Mike?
Not a question for Zaire, just a general comment. Firstly, congratulations. I think it's a brilliant initiative. I do have an objection to the term market failure, because funded by the municipality on municipal infrastructure which no private operator was given access to is not a failure of the market. That is a unique and excellent hybrid opportunity which was grabbed, has delivered service and well done, but I don't think you can now point at the market and say the market failed because it didn't open up Tshwane's own fibre infrastructure and get paid by the city to deliver services. You guys managed, well done. The market was busy trying to do what it had always done and not succeeding. So I don't consider that a failure. I consider that to be old business models which weren't delivering the impact. But this is not a case where private enterprise had every opportunity and decided not to go in there. Many of us have tried to get into City of Tshwane and to access that infrastructure and have been refused, and beyond that have been refused access to waivers to deploy fibre where there was existing city fibre. So I think just if we can balance that a little bit, it would be appreciated.
Thank you for that comment. We don't need a response at the moment.
Are you sure? I'd love to respond.
No. That's the same question I asked the minister, by the way. Questions. I see lots of hands, a few more hands. Yolandi. Loud, please.
This is a question for White Taxi. How do you label the technology in the taxi?
It's via a 3G in some areas LTE routers wired into a car, and we use telecom as a network provider. The router itself can connect up to 22 people inside.
Walter, I'll give you a chance. Next, gentleman there at the back. Loud, please.
I just wanted to know about voice services, because we talk a lot about broadband as well, but also one of the big requirements that we see, it's in the rural areas, is there's no pop in the ground. So you can't get a fixed line or voice service in there. So I just wanted to get, the question is, how do you see voice on the Wi-Fi network that you provide? And what do you need to put it there?
Maybe Ellie, you can answer, and if anyone else wants to also add to that.
Sure, I'll do my best. Let me introduce this by saying I'm not in any way a voice expert, so please excuse my general ignorance of that. What I do know is that to deliver voice, you need to have a very, very reliable network, because obviously the quality of service considerations are quite high. So there's a couple things. Mainly, I think what you're talking about is backhaul problem. So in rural areas, wireless, whether licensed or license exempt, for example, such as what's provided by a lot of the WAPA members, the WISPs, can be a way to get that actual line to a location. And then in terms of voice over Wi-Fi, again, and actually this is touching on something that we were discussing earlier, is this whole notion of carrier grade or best efforts, or premium quality versus best efforts. Because a lot of Wi-Fi networks, there is a major difference in price between a premium piece of kit and a very low-end piece of kit or a residential piece of kit. If you're trying to deliver voice services, that's a consideration. Backhaul is a consideration, and the choice of kit is a consideration. Your network management is definitely a consideration as well. So it's a tough question. I think the main point when it comes down, because you asked about Wi-Fi, is because of the nature of Wi-Fi as a license-exempt shared medium, it's actually really, really tough to guarantee any sort of quality of service at these levels. Not to say that it's impossible. People do have software and do have solutions, and again, I'm not an expert, but I think not exactly a very clear answer to your question, but I think those are some of the considerations around it.
Can I add on?
Okay, sorry. As long as not Project Disease.
Well, it is Project Disease, but I just wanted to advise the audience that by September, October this year, Project Disease will be enabling something called Wi-Fi voice over the 200 Wi-Fi network, which essentially enables voice services over the network. And yes, we've got a combination of carrier grade, which is essentially suited to carry voice traffic, as well as non-carrier grade technology deployed over this network. And we'll just use GSM or a specific codecs to actually control the actual capacity required to carry the voice traffic. And we're going to have some smart internet network systems that actually manage and control the traffic and prioritization for voice.
Thank you, Zaire. Well done with that. Brian, you wanted to jump in?
Right, I think as part of a gimmick when we launched White Taxi, one of the things that we did a Skype meeting between ourselves and Pick and Pay. I was in Dainfern at Auto in General, and I had a whole Skype meeting for 1 hour inside a taxi with the Pick and Pay guys in Cape Town. So in terms of voice, currently what our commuters are using your normal Viber apps and all that. So it's not great quality, but there are new apps that are coming on board. We don't need any new things. The technology exists, so we don't need any more clever people. All we need is to improve is to improve the current network that we have in order to run that. So that there aren't any new things that people can tell us. They exist, they are there. We just need a better quality of service, particularly from our MNOs, mobile network operators.
Thank you, Brian. Sorry, is that Seppo?
Yeah, it is.
It is Seppo. I recognized you, Seppo. Please be loud so everyone can hear.
This country has something called the Universal Service Agency that is supposedly bridging the digital divide the last 20 years or so since I started working in telecoms. Organizations such as yourself, CISWE, whatever, Project CISWE, where's the connect or disconnect with an agency that was specifically set up to deliver on that specific mandate, and using state resources, I don't know. Government is very well known for, as you say, you guys don't collaborate.
Thank you for that question. I wonder whether the chairperson of the Wi-Fi Forum can comment on that. The minister didn't comment on USASA this time, and I don't know what the latest is. Maybe Andile, you can just.
It's always like, well, there's a whip of the committee here and the chairperson of the committee, and we'll pass the ball like
that.
ball.
Hot potato.
But let me give it a quick bite. I don't know if maybe the chair and the wave of the committee maybe might want to say something. I think, colleagues, I mean, what we are trying to do here is exactly to address that. I mean, I think what is being done, I mean, you know, by the people in the panel here is something that this country does require. And we hope that as the Wi-Fi forum, we will present that panel to USASA, to different stakeholders, so that they can be able to engage with the community in order to address these universal service issues. I mean, universal service definition of 10 years ago and 20 years ago has of course changed. You know, 20 years ago, when we wrote a universal service definition, we talked about a dial tone. We talked about, remember, I mean, yes, Mike, before he had gray hair, you know. We talked about the dial tone. We talked about 100, we said, remind me, Mike, I don't know how many kilometers to a public phone. Right? So this is the time when that law was written, the definition of USASA. It was USAID, Universal Service Agency. That because, I mean, I remember in one meeting, Zeth was debating about, he made an example of a village in Limpopo that, I mean, people were almost saying how many kilometers people should walk to go to a phone for people to make a phone call. And this is the debate in 92, 93, 94, 95, 96 that led to the writing of that law. So what I'm trying to say is that, colleagues, with the experience of the people in the panel and the community here, we need to reconstruct this picture and say, what is it that today that people, I mean, an example of saying, how do you involve Coke, who has a billboard in a village? How do you involve, you know, Unilever, who has a billboard in a village, in this debate? Gone are the days for us to think that the only people involved are those people who understand, you know, 10-base T, you know, MPLS. No, I mean, the game here has changed. And therefore, we need the people who run, you know, I was talking to some community outside here, they represent, you know, B&B. So what I'm trying to say, Raj, is that honestly, it is this community that must define these things. And we need to accept the fact that these things are going to change. We might come up with one approach this year, and a year from now, I mean, we will have our devices building a mesh. Cars are going to be a mesh. You know, so it's the ability to try and ensure that our thinking is non-static. So in my view, Chairperson, I mean, we need to sit back and look at that definition of what USASA is all about in this age to address the issues that we cannot work in using that model because these things have changed. How do people, for instance, in a village, use their own phones as wireless access points and create a mesh using their devices? So that's basically, you know, I wouldn't say that there's any way. I think it is that dialogue and the community and how people work. The last point I want to raise is that for this community, through all the people in the panel, the success of this is if we can create a common currency as a community, so that we have an environment whereby when you use Wi-Fi anywhere, whatever you want to define it as a bundle, it can work in any Wi-Fi. Whether you go to Malawi, whether you go to Zimbabwe, whether you go say to Mozambique, if you bought, say, Wi-Fi bundle in Deep's Lodge, and you are now going to go on holiday in Maputo, that bundle of yours must be able to work. But that is why the success of this environment is through a community, not us thinking we can operate individually. If we will think we'll operate individually, we will never succeed. I mean, the best thing that should happen here is that, what I'm trying to say, airtime of one Wi-Fi provider must work in another Wi-Fi. That would be the success of this industry.
Thank you, Chairperson. And in fact, that was one of my questions that I was going to ask was, when you have all these different Wi-Fi networks, is there a need for interconnect agreement between them so that you buy once and you can migrate between either free or paid for ones? But we unfortunately don't have time to do that. Maybe that's part of the working committee. Please give a round of applause to the panelists. Taking place here is Wi-Fi deployments in real estate, so malls, etc. The topic next door is 2020 and the role of Wi-Fi, of which Walter and Andile are going to be attending. So please move between the rooms.